to your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet fellas, sweet fellas, talking twins and hierarchy. Sweet fellas, sweet fellas, relentless focus on their bodies. Sweet fellas, sweet fellas, what do they mean by all American? Sweet fellas, sweet fellas, no sex, just titillation.
All right.
That reminds me, I need to
Hi.
email a student about her plagiarism.
Okay, way to violate HERFSA. Whatever you
I
call
am
it.
absolutely violating. What did you call it? HERFSA?
I don't know. You call it. You reference something.
FERPA.
Okay, but aren't I pretty close?
You're really close, but I didn't like say her name or really anything about her at all.
Yeah, except her pronouns, thereby, which is literally the only definition of identifiable biographical information. Like it's, we're now slicing and dicing. I mean, if this is the game of what's it called with the faces, the one.
Guess who? Guess who?
If it's guess who, we got a lot to flop down now that we know her pronouns, and we're flopping them down, and we got fewer left. So that's going to help us in our trying to find out who she is, which we're of course all invested in naturally.
Yeah, obviously. Also, there are 20 students in the class, and 19 of them use she, her pronouns. So you're actually not flopping as much as you think you might be flopping.
19 is a very small number. Well, you know what? You're the expert. I'm happy for you to, to take this up with the Board of Education or whatever your governing body is. And I can absolutely stay out of it. Never forget when I was in grad school, and it wasn't my student, but my friend Derek, who did listen to one episode. And if he's still listening now, I celebrate him. But
He's
he
not,
had a
by the
student.
way, just as a quick note, he's not.
Okay, but he had a student plagiarize in a really, really funny way, which was they not only and of course this is before ChatGPT, and kids say we'll never know how hard it was to plagiarize effectively, but so they fully not only lifted full on paragraphs and articles from Wikipedia without changing literally a word, but they pasted with style, so the hyperlinks were made, and they submitted it in the Wikipedia formatting with the Wikipedia hyperlinks, and that's just lazy. Okay, that's lazy at that point.
It's really, really funny.
All right, so we're starting at, let's call it 5. So we're going to be done by 7. We're going to say 2 hours.
Have to be.
Great. Period.
Period. End of sentence.
And we should pretend that we have kind of a exploding bomb ticking in our chest. And if we go to 7:01, one of us dies, but we don't know which one it actually is.
I know who I'm hoping for.
That's mean. Okay, what's your sixth
Take me, time bomb. Take me. That's a good life,
The book at hand.
To the book at hand. Do we start with the cliffhanger from last week, or what do we do?
We start with the 6-word review.
Of course. I've got something. Not rivals, but maybe lesbian love triangle? Love triangle, of course, famously being one word.
We're twins.
Wait, Elizabeth Jessica twins where we're opposites, or traditional twins where we're the
twins
exact
where
same?
we twins on the outside of them, twins on how they are on the outside. We look this. No, I mean
twins
the
like how
same
they
way-
are on the outside.
Okay, the same way how the way they look is identical. We share that qualitative attribute. Not that we're physically identical, of course, but then on the inside we're identical, because I was basically going the same direction with my 6-word review. The word lesbian love triangle was in my head.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was gonna go to manufactured lesbian rivalry for Elizabeth's sexual titillation.
Yeah, if you count sexual titillation as one word, and I do, perfect. So that was manufactured lesbian rivalry for Elizabeth.
Elizabeth's sexual titillation. It's great. This is great. Sometimes we're misaligned. Sometimes we're kind of fractionally aligned. I mean, it sounds like in this one, we're pretty aligned.
Pretty lesbian
Yeah.
aligned.
And to remind our listeners, to remind them that the book we're talking about today, Sweet Valley High number 29, called Bitter Rivals.
Do we need a
Cliffhanger?
cliffhanger?
Let's just say what it is. It's very simple.
Liz's best friend from 6th grade, Amy, who moved away, is moving back. Interestingly, sometimes when we revisit the cliffhangers, we see things like, this is interesting. I don't know if this is interesting to me or not. But Liz is talking about Amy. Better yet, they're moving to Sweet Valley. I still can't believe it. I have to keep pinching myself. I can't believe she'll really be back here again. When are they moving in? Enid asked, her voice flat.
Not to whatever. You didn't notice that last time? I thought it was like so glaring. I thought it was like implied. Like,
I too noticed it. Definitely. No, I noticed it so much. I actually wrote some words about it last week and I forgot to share them. Next week. Enid, I can't wait for you to meet Amy. You two are going to love each other. Enid didn't answer. Have you guys been keeping up with each other all this time? Kara demanded, which also seems weird. Have you guys been writing letters? Not really. We write on Christmas and on birthdays, but that's all. That's why I was so surprised when I saw her handwriting on the envelope today. Lila smiled. Well, with Amy coming back to Sweet Valley and my cousin Christopher visiting any day now, it looks like the next few weeks are going to be pretty exciting. Elizabeth hugged herself. She was so thrilled about Amy. She couldn't imagine better news. She just couldn't wait for the days to pass until Amy's arrival. She was far too excited to notice the frown on Enid Rollins' face. Enid had been Elizabeth's best friend for a long, long time, but obviously not as long as Amy Sutton. And Enid couldn't help wondering if Elizabeth was going to have any time left for her once her former best friend moved into the Bradleys' house the following week. Will Elizabeth's renewed friendship with Amy Sutton leave Enid stranded? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 29, Bitter Rivals. Every reaction here is completely unhinged. Liz hugging herself with excitement is unhinged. Enid being so hostile for no reason is unhinged. Kara demanding to know whether they've kept up with each other is unhinged. The only reaction I understand is Lila being like, well, at least we can talk about my cousin again. And even that's unhinged, because why is Lila so into her cousin Christopher?
I wonder if I'm just trying to think what Kara might be getting at. And I wonder if it might have to do with so Amy's mom, Diane Sutton, is like a TV journalist. And she now has come back to be a journalist there. There's some glamour attached to this and some excitement attached to this. And I think that might be a little bit of what excites Liz about kind of the aura of Amy and the fact of oh, and this is my old friend. So she has some foundational connection to the world of Amy. And there may be something aspirational about this for Liz or whatever. It's true that they basically, what we're told is they basically kept in regular touch for a while and then lost touch, and then they recently got back in touch when she said she's moving back, but they haven't talked too much, but Liz is super excited, and Liz is expecting it's going to be exactly the same. And I wonder if Kara's kind of saying oh really, you guys have are still so close or still talk all the time? You've literally never mentioned her ever. I've never heard of her in my life. So that's interesting. Kara's reformed, but she's not necessarily completely unpitty.
Yeah, she's no angel. The other thing is, and it gets clarified in this book, it says here that Enid had been Elizabeth's best friend for a long, long time.
Yeah, that's a stretch.
Because wasn't it sophomore year that they became best friends, and now it's junior year?
Well, she moved to Sweet Valley, but then she was in all that trouble, and then
Famously.
That was way before she met all these kids. So, or no, wait, that was at least a while before. So yeah.
I mean, it just seemed like a lot to me.
Okay. You do A plot?
I always do the A plot, and I feel like the listeners
Fine, I'll do the A plot.
Thank you.
So as we said, Amy's coming back, and Liz is from the jump, like she's super excited about it, and seems to be assuming like they're going to be best friends again and that Amy's the exact same person she was when they were 12. And she immediately starts like putting a lot of pressure on Enid of like, oh, you're just gonna love her and you guys are gonna be best friends too. And Enid is very clearly uncomfortable. Everything Liz is describing about Amy is all these things that are like very much not what Enid is and not what Liz so much is. Like she's exciting, she's vivacious. And then Amy shows up and Liz starts to treat Enid in an inconsiderate way and starts like flaking on her and stuff in order to direct her attention to and please Amy. Liz is sensing that like maybe she and Amy aren't as similar as they used to be, or maybe Amy has different interests than her, and she starts actually hanging out more with Jess and Lila. And also she's like not being very considerate to Liz, and she is increasingly also like flaking on Liz and then being like very dramatic in her apologies. Basically at the end, Liz realizes, okay, Amy kind of sucks and I've been really not being nice to Enid, and then she and Enid make up, and she realizes she and Amy's gonna kind of not really be friends. Is the paraphrasable content. What's really going on here, or like what must be actually asked is, Liz's excitement about Amy coming back is over the top. It is extreme. There's a lot of, for example, instances of her like thinking dreamily, you know, you mentioned her hugging herself. There's her thinking dreamily about Amy. She's almost, and she has this like almost infatuation with Amy, or this thing where she like, I don't know, there's something there, right? And then Enid this whole time is like, she couldn't quite put into words what Elizabeth meant to her. And after Todd moved to Vermont, they started spending every single weekend together, cozied up on the couch watching movies. And she couldn't really put into words, but it was something more than loyalty and friendship. But she wondered, why was she having this jealous reaction and feeling so possessive? What was this strange feeling? Okay, so that's the journey Enid's on. And you know, it's a lesbian love triangle. That's what it is. You know, and this whole Amy being described as a tomboy, and tomboy potentially being kind of a coded way of denoting her as being a certain type, is also part of the conversation.
Yeah, there's all sorts of sexual tension just kind of like ricocheting in that modest split level home.
Okay, do beat plot. The beat plot's so fun. I'm so nice for letting you do it. I'm such a nice girl.
The B plot is an absolute barn burner. Jess and Kara are writing a column for the Oracle. Wait, what? Liz is the one who writes for the Oracle, Eyes and Ears, of course, as well as other pointless things about computers and summertime jobs and all sorts of other random shit. Yes, but Jess and Kara are getting in on it this time. And what are they writing about? They're writing a Miss Lovelorn column where they take romantic advice questions from the high school and they respond and write advice to them. And it is so great. And Jess has this crush on this junior boy, Jay McGuire, and Jay McGuire is dating Denise Hadley, who is a senior. So far, it's like, oh, what? That's just the stuff that would be in an Eyes and Ears column. There's no news here. Except Jess is Jay's conversation partner en français, and she is falling in love with him. So she devises an amazing plot to break them up. She writes fake letters to Miss Lovelorn, one from a junior boy who's like, I'm really worried because all my friends make fun of me because I'm dating someone older than me, and I'm worried that she's going to leave, and should we break up? And one from a senior girl saying, I'm dating a boy who's younger than me. I'm really worried I'm going to leave for college. Should we break up? And she tells both of them in the Miss Lovelorn column, you should break up. Because Jess is a mistress of manipulation, of course they do break up. Jess worms her way into Jay's heart. They make out. Unfortunately, Jay sees Denise again at Lila's huge party and is like, no, I really love her. Unbeknownst to each other, each of them has written in a letter to the Miss Lovelorn column saying, I just broke up with my partner because they're a year older than me or a year younger than me, and I miss them very much, and I just want to get back together with them. What should I do? In classic Jess and Cara fashion, they actually don't submit their next column. So Liz does. She prints those letters, says, y'all should get back together. Denise and Jay read those letters, get back together. They're in love. Can we do the rarest of rare, which is a C plot? Lila's hot cousin Christopher is coming to town, and everybody's obsessed with Christopher. All we can talk about is, oh, this Christopher, he's so hot. He's from Kennebunkport, Maine. I just want to bang him so hard. He's my dream boy. Amy Sutton falls in love with him just from the picture. Amy Sutton, it must be said, for being involved in Liz's lesbian love triangle is boy crazy. And she decides that cousin Christopher has to be hers. Lila throws the party to end all parties to welcome cousin Christopher, constantly and inappropriately talking about how hot cousin Christopher is and making everyone deeply uncomfortable. At this party, which happens to be a costume party, Christopher sees a face in the crowd that he recognizes and is drawn to. Is it the gorgeous face of ballerina Amy Sutton? Is it the seductive face of coal-lined Cleopatra Jessica? No, no, no. It is the pretty but otherwise unremarkable, bookish and dorky face of Enid Rollins. Christopher was Enid Rollins' sailing instructor at sailing camp a couple years back, and it turns out they pick up right where they left off like a house on fire. And they're very, very into each other. Amy gets jealous, tries to break them up, is unsuccessful, and it seems like Chris and Enid, a dish best served, piping hot. And that's the C-plot.
What is the Rollins financial situation? Sailing camp seems like a rich person thing.
Agreed.
And we know that when Liz and Jess are off on perfect summer biking, Enid has to be home scooping ice cream, having a summer job. We also know that when Liz and Jess are in France, Enid has to be home working. So the 2 summers we've seen, Enid's been having to be the one home working. So before she's going to sailing camp, I'm just wondering what's going on here.
I have a theory. Because
pre-divorce.
Oh, that's a great idea. I was thinking it was more of like an outward bound for troubled youth kind of situation, because that many summers before would have been like the George of it all. And so maybe her parents sent her to sailing camp to like get her out of the drug infested waters that she was swimming with George.
Okay, I mean, this sounds like a bit of a stretch for me, just given that what they call it sailing camp. But okay, all right, I guess it's possible. Sure, it is possible. You know, is that something Lila's cousin Christopher is doing? You know, she did say he's from an interesting branch of the family tree, maybe a little more charitable than the rest of them. So sure, it's within the realm of possibility, I guess. Now, just one other thing I wanted to say about what you said regarding the B plot. I love that you are now like a Jessica stan. And I really, 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 really love that. And we have to sometimes check ourselves.
Oh no.
And say, are we cherry picking? And I know sometimes you aren't afraid to leave out a detail or two that may paint Jessica not the most flattering light. And you did leave out a little bit of an important detail when you were describing Jessica's emerging relationship with Jay, which was that the reason like why he kissed her, or like part of the reason why he kissed, like first he physically actually rejected her. She put her hand on his knee and he was like, not happening. And then she thought to herself, well, I guess I have to do something else. And she made up a whole cloth ass lie that there's a rumor going around that Denise was cheating on him. And then he kissed her. So, you know, I'm just saying we have to keep ourselves honest here.
Yeah, that's fair.
Do you want to guess the taglines? Taglines are the funniest thing you've ever heard in your life, i.e., okay.
Will Amy replace Enid for Elizabeth's lover?
Even more ideological, even worse. Like, even more like, oh my God, this book and these taglines are literally written by Liz.
Can Liz stop Amy from destroying her friendship with Enid?
Basically, yes. Will Elizabeth be forced to choose between Amy and Enid?
And the answer is no, of course.
The back you could guess. And it is the typical back structure.
A new girl in town, ... Return of an old friend, ...
No, but you can get it. You can definitely get it.
Sorry, I'm freaking out.
What is the central core dynamic whose tension is being explored supposedly in this story? The sort of aphorism that we would say to describe this, and that's a big clue.
What's the
Yes.
thing about like new friends and old friends and something?
You're overthinking it. It's, may I say?
Please.
It's three's a crowd. ...
Duh. They talk about three's a crowd the whole time. They might as well just be polyamory is hard, ... Right?
Are you ready to see?
I'm ready.
Lord help us. Ours.
Huh. So Liz is standing towards us in a blue polo shirt that is horizontally striped. She's got her hand on her chin. And she's kind of looking out blankly to us. Behind her is it must be said, very, very hot Amy Sutton. And the less hot Enid. And they're looking at each other kind of askance. They're casting daggers at one another. We've got Amy wearing a pink blouse.
You know, sometimes you could just say it. You could just say blouse even.
Oh, what did I say?
You know what it is? It's, you gotta either go for it or not. But the problem is sometimes you kind of have to do it and you stop yourself. So it's like blouse. So it's like, you know, but just commit. And I support you. Or just say blouse if that's okay too. Sometimes just say it the normal way. So totally fine. You, whatever you want, I'm here. What's that?
It's kind of like da. I don't know how I said da.
Da.
Sorry, so Amy's wearing a pink blouse. Enid is wearing maybe a green blouse. And everybody's arms are crossed across their chest. Liz has raised one hand to her chin, but Amy and Enid's arms are crossed as to say, like, this means war. And that's all I've got.
So Elizabeth's looking at us. Elizabeth has one arm across her waist, the other under her chin, almost like a sinking pose. And Enid and Amy behind her have their arms folded, as you said. You said they had their eyes daggered at each other. The way I see it, their eyes are actually pointed at Liz.
Yeah.
And they both have one eyebrow raised. So much in a skeptical face, I would say, or a questioning face. And I feel that they're actually directing their tension or their skeptic at Liz. And Liz, what I see in her face is smug, the smuggest expression I've ever seen. It's like Blair on Gossip Girl. She has her one hip sort of to the side and her eyebrows are casually raised, sort of asking the viewer almost like, what? There's all these scenes in the book where it's like Liz was telling everyone at school how amazing Amy was, and her face glowed when she talked about Amy. And I think there's a particular excitement that she gets from being publicly associated with Amy. So I think her looking outward also signifies that. And them two having their eyes on her, I think, is also signifying, like, Liz, what's going on here? Because they don't actually hate each other. Like, they don't, the truth is they don't care about each other.
Yeah, the way that Liz is looking out now that I've looked at it more carefully, it isn't blank. It definitely is smug. And it is almost as if to say, like, what? It's not my fault all these girls want me. Like,
yeah, like, who me? Who me?
Who me?
The other thing that is so glaring and must be said is that Elizabeth and Enid are essentially dressed identically.
Yes.
They are wearing, it looks like a summer camp counselor uniform or something. And it's not only that they're dressed in the same style. If you look closely, you can see, unless I'm imagining it, they're wearing literally the exact same bottoms, which looks like some sort of khaki short or pant. They are slightly different shade of khaki or wheat, as it were. The particular way that the waist is gathered, the belt, it looks like it's the identical bottom. And then the top, they're both wearing a different turquoise colored short sleeve polo. Given the juxtaposition of the title, Bitter Rivals, the dynamic pictured in the cover, and then the sort of visual kind of sartorial alignment between Liz and Enid. If there are any bitter rivals in this group, who are they? Is it actually something else? Is it actually Liz and Enid? Is there competitiveness between the two of them that is maybe unarticulated heretofore? And we're always talking about Lila and Jess are the rivals. So, I'm not saying that's even necessarily it, but.
So you say the word heretofore in a way that I've never heard it pronounced before.
That's a nice way to tell me I said it wrong. You could just said I said it wrong.
But I thought it was a nice way of saying it. I've never heard it that way.
Well, that's because I'm obviously saying it wrong. So it's heretofore? That sounds weird. I like heretofore because when we say other things like hetero, we don't say hetero.
Well, but heretofore is just the word here, the word to, and the word for smushed together.
So other times we smush words together and they don't always keep the original pronunciation.
Definitely true. I was just confused. And it's now been cleared up for me.
Okay, well, where do we go from here?
The book series as a whole asks us to do some kind of strange mental gymnastics where when it works for the plot, Liz is so perceptive and so insightful and can see exactly what's going on and is like mature beyond her years. And sometimes when it works for the plot, she behaves like no one would ever behave. And I feel like lots of this book is her being really shitty in ways where it's like, the Liz I know probably wouldn't actually do this. And maybe it is just that she's all wrapped up in the Amy of it all. But it was parts of it were a little like, oh, don't do that, Liz.
I definitely agree parts of it were don't do that, Liz. I guess I see those sides of her as more reconcilable than you do. Like, I guess I see when she does these things that seem so oblivious or so destructive or so obviously like, don't do that, Liz. I guess I just see it as denial and like she does her own mental gymnastics, and that is kind of a consistent thing in her character. And the first sentence of the book, and we'll get to it, is like Jess says, Liz, you're not listening to me. And like this whole book is Liz just continuing to ignore everything everyone's trying to tell her. She ignores Enid's signals and explicit things that she says. She ignores Amy's signals. She ignores Jess. She ignores what Alice tells her. She ignores her own, and she just sort of is really trying to force this thing. I really like this book because I find it kind of really stressful to read. It's just it's kind of painful, but like, I do think that even though a lot of things are maybe exaggerated and it didn't have to go that far, the tension and the things that it describes is very real to, like, maybe you can speak to this, but like, at least for girls, like adolescent friendship dynamics and this thing of like having a best friend and that's one person, and what happens when there's two girls and they're best friends, and that's very straightforward, but when there's a third, it can get very complicated. And what I also kind of liked about it until the very end was that I thought a lot of it was actually pretty subtle and pretty nuanced. Like, for example, like some of the ways Amy responds, kind of like with Karen in Nowhere to Run. It's like some of the ways Amy responds, like her initial apologies or her initial, like, there's a couple times where she does seem to take an interest in Enid, and you're like, oh, maybe she is actually trying.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like neutral and they're just going to grow apart or whatever. But it's like, in the end, she has to be a bitch, which I felt was unnecessary. But a lot of it I felt was actually really realistic in that sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you're right. Like the very end where there's like kind of the reveal of just how terrible Amy is being, it's like, well, this actually no longer makes as much sense. It made much more sense when it was like the give and take of three people trying to negotiate a new relationship where no one is really a villain. We're all just trying to fall into new roles.
Yeah, it's like, it's actually very, very annoying because I really liked the book up until that point. So, which basically is just like the main problem is Elizabeth's just trying to force a friendship that doesn't need to be there. And like, yeah, Amy and Enid could have just happily sort of peacefully coexisted. But then it's like we have to have this scene where there's a reveal that Amy's yelling at Enid secretly and like saying really mean things to her. And yeah, it just has to go to this villainous place, and I just wish it wouldn't have gone to that next step. But alrighty. Yeah. Oh, and it also must be said, is it the first with three people on the cover?
I was thinking that may be the case.
God forbid I think something you haven't thought already. Imagine. What?
I can't even imagine it.
Okay.
You want to get into the book?
Mm-hmm.
So the book opens, as you kind of skillfully pointed out, with Jessica trying to get through to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth just kind of in her own dream world. She says, sorry, Jess, I was just thinking about Amy Sutton. That's all. I can't believe she's really moving back to Sweet Valley. And at this point, I'm already like, my lesbo sense is going wild. Like, not being able to participate in your own daily life because you're fantasizing about your friend coming back into town feels like a lot.
Yep.
She hugs her knees with excitement again. She's just like bursting at the seams with some kind of energy for Amy's return.
She also keeps saying, I can't believe, which would imply that, like, for her to say I can't believe would make me think that, like, this whole time she and Amy have been, like, keeping in touch and talking about, like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if we one day lived in the same place again? Oh my gosh, it's actually happening. I can't believe it. But it's like, no, they haven't been in touch and aren't that close anymore. And of course, it would be nice to see each other. And I'm sure they'll be so happy and excited when they do. But, like, the idea that it's like, I can't believe this, and she's so distracted by it. Yeah, that's horniness. She's horny struck.
She's horny struck, which is fine. It happens to all of us. It's just like more helpful we can label it ourselves. What's interesting also is use the I can't believe. It's almost like she's been fantasizing about it for a long time, and now it's coming true.
And then we get to the part that makes any reader just, if you didn't have a sense something's up, Enid's like, I just hope we like each other, which is weird. But then, Enid Rollins, Elizabeth exclaimed with mock horror, jumping up and running over to hug her friend. Of course you'll like each other. Amy Sutton is fabulous. She's so vivacious, so bouncy, so much fun. And Jessica cuts in and says, you make her sound like a trampoline. We'd be remiss to not reference Salt Lake City, season 4, when Angie called Meredith Marks a trampoline with eyes. Then on the reunion, she said it was a compliment. We said this already, but we have to look at the words that Liz is using to describe Amy, that Enid's going to like her, is fabulous, vivacious, and bouncy, and fun. It's so weird, you know, and it really makes you think Elizabeth has to be, unless she's totally oblivious, she must know that that's literally the opposite of Enid. It's honestly the opposite of her. Like, it's Jessica. So it's like, it's hard to think of an explanation that doesn't involve her wanting Enid to feel threatened by this, you know?
Yeah. Just the way that it's all kind of set up.
You know,
Elizabeth's excitement is like pitting them against each other before they've even started.
it's like on Love Island when a bombshell walks in and people are already in a couple, and it's like, but they haven't said they're closed off yet. And it's like, is their head gonna turn? Like, Enid knows her head's gonna turn.
Yeah, I mean, Elizabeth's head is like turning round and round like Linda Blair in The Exorcist. She is obsessed. I'm sure you clocked this, but Amy's mom is not just a journalist. She's a TV sportscaster named Diane, spelled D-Y-A-N. Diane. That's a name.
And Jessica's like, it's so exciting. Do you think she can introduce us to athletes?
Meanwhile, Jessica's biggest concern is that last book we found out that the Bradleys are moving and the Suttons are moving into the Bradleys' house. And of course, Helen Bradley, a member of the cheer squad. So now we have to audition new people for the cheer squad. You remember what happened last time. And of course, we do remember that was Wrong Kind of Girl. Annie Whitman wants to be on the cheer squad, but she is what a housewife would call a trampoline with thighs, I guess. No?
Wait, what does that mean?
Wait, sorry, what did... So
it means like her skin's pulled so tight.
Oh,
that's how I interpreted it. Wait, hold on. What did you interpret it?
A human trampoline, like people are bouncing on her. Please know, like, I'm doing the universal penetrative sex motion towards Pardo. Is that not that? It may not be.
Trampoline with eyes? I guess because it made me think of face, because she said with eyes. Like, she didn't say like you're the town trampoline or something. Then I would think. You know what? I don't know. All right. Okay, just one funny thing about the cheerleading thing. Like, so Helen Bradley's leaving and Jess is like, oh, I'm so stressed out. And Liz is like, oh, but she'll just be in LA. I'm sure you can still see her sometimes. And Jess is like, oh, what? I don't care about that. I don't care about seeing her. I just don't want to deal with having to do more tryouts. It's funny.
I loved it.
And then it just tells them about this column she's going to do. It's the love advice column, Miss Lovelorn. Enid is being rude and sexist and thinking that Jess is not exactly known for her like literary talent or something like that. But then Jessica fires off a couple of letters they got and her answers to them, and they're genius.
Yeah, that's great.
They're like beyond fantastic. I think we have to read them.
Please.
The letter is from a sad sophomore. Dear Miss Lovelorn, I hate to be one of the first to ask you for advice, but I'm really up a creek. All of my friends have boyfriends except for me. Everywhere I go, I seem to be the only one without a date. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, since I'm okay looking and have a decent personality. Can you rush me some advice before I spend the rest of my high school years alone?
Dear sad sophomore, quit sulking and start doing the asking yourself. Next time you want to date somewhere, ask someone. And if he says no, go by yourself and have a good time. Miss Lovelorn always has fun when she goes places by herself.
So good.
Yeah, it's great. Put yourself out there. The next one. Dear Miss Lovelorn, my problem is too many girls. Girls are always fighting over me, and I have 10 times as many as I can handle. I can't do anything without getting chased. The thing is that I really am a deep, sensitive guy, and I want a lasting relationship. How can I convince these girls that I want something more? Signed, Sweet Valley Swinger.
Okay, so her answer is, Dear Swinger, Miss Lovelorn is unimpressed. You sound like a giant zip in the sincerity department. Any girl worth lasting with will probably stay miles away. Shape up or find another branch to swing from.
She's good at what she does. So the phone rings. It is Amy, and Amy is saying that they're going to move back to town, and they've set their moving date, and it's a week from this Sunday. Enid has kind of a bristly response to this. She tries to keep her voice normal, but she asks about the ski trip because Liz and Enid had planned to go to Tahoe with Enid's Aunt Nancy, and the ski trip was supposed to be next weekend. Elizabeth had just realized that going away that weekend would prevent her from seeing the Suttons when they arrived. Amy thought they were coming Sunday, and Elizabeth really wanted to be home then. She couldn't imagine not being there to welcome her friend back after so many years. Her cheeks reddening a little, Elizabeth told Enid about her conflict. Do you think we could put the trip off for a few weeks? That way there couldn't be a chance of missing Amy when she moves in. Enid hesitated before answering. Okay, she said at last, making an effort to look as if she didn't mind. Maybe we can invite Amy to come along when we finally go, she added, ignoring the lump in her throat. This is midway through the first chapter, and this is already like extreme red flags. The idea that Elizabeth needs to change her out-of-town plans so that she can be home to welcome Amy because she couldn't not be there when Amy comes back. She couldn't just see her the next day. Seems pretty extreme.
It's definitely rude. And she knows it because her cheeks are reddening.
So her cheeks are reddening because she is interested in Amy sexually.
I think her cheeks are reddening because she knows it's wrong of her to do this. Like she knows it's wrong of her to compromise their plans. Chapter 2, they're all at school talking about Amy's coming back. Lila's like, oh, wasn't she clumsy and tomboyish? And then Liz responds, she wasn't all that clumsy. And yes, she loves sports. Then Lila tells them all about her cousin Christopher's coming, and she very grossly goes on and on about how hot he is. And he's coming from Maine. He's a terrific yachtsman and a great dancer too.
I mean, I'm not interested.
Well, he's 6'2", wavy, thick blonde hair, amazing blue eyes, sort of pierced right through you. Lila's gonna have the party to end all parties for him. She's even gonna get the hottest band from LA, the #1, to perform.
Which feels like droid erasure and pretty shitty of her. She should have just had the droids.
But then it would be like any other party. This one has to feel different.
Okay. Elizabeth wanted her old friend to fit in at Sweet Valley High. Not that being friendly with Lila Fowler mattered to Elizabeth. She cared much more about getting Amy involved with the Oracle, introducing her to her closest friends, and making sure she felt welcome and happy. It's so interesting the way that Elizabeth wants Amy to just kind of slot into her life.
I wrote, why does she assume Amy cares about the Oracle? And then later there's reference to like when they were in 6th grade, they did a newspaper together. I'm like, okay, again, like they were 12. Enid's inferiority. Oh, and it says in 10th grade, she and Liz became friends.
Right? So it's only been a year.
Mm-hmm.
Enid often watched Elizabeth and Jessica with a mixture of amazement and envy. She couldn't imagine what it must be like to have a sister, let alone a twin, someone so like yourself in every way. Elizabeth was the closest thing Enid had to a sister, and she now realized that she felt very possessive of her. Secretly, she felt jealous of Amy Sutton. After all, Amy had known Elizabeth, Enid reflected, a lot longer than she had. And every time Elizabeth had described her, Amy sounded more ideal. How could Enid possibly hope to compete with her? So there's this like swirling of thoughts and emotions that Enid is having. To me, it's interesting that she's envious of Elizabeth's relationship with Jess when we mostly see the fractured nature of Elizabeth's relationship with Jess. And like, yes, they're sisters, but like the whole point of these books is that they're not alike. And she says she couldn't imagine having a twin, someone so like yourself in every way. It's kind of a strange departure from the kind of lore of the text, isn't it?
I mean, Jess and Liz still are really, really close and do share an unbreakable bond and connection. But Enid doesn't have a sister. I mean, it's just different. Like, I get that. But I do think it points to, like, and so does Jessica's first sentence in the book, an unarticulated question of, you know, if you can only have one best friend, this whole book is asking, like, is Amy going to replace Enid? But it's like, where does all this leave Jess?
And has Enid been threatened by Jess in the past? I don't remember her being threatened.
Not that we've heard, only the reverse.
Right? So it's just a little, it's all a little confusing. The internal logic of the book is a little.
Yeah, but I don't know that it's
confusing.
inconsistent. Like, those can both make sense if they're threatened by each other. I mean, we've
But
not
she
gotten
isn't
much of.
threatened by her. That's what I'm saying. We've never seen anything about Enid being threatened by her at all.
I mean, we had one book that had some of Enid's perspective on it, and not even that much. Like, it's not like we've had so much of Enid's perspective.
Nor would I want it. She's kind of a drip.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I just think it's interesting that she sees Jessica and she says she's like a mixture of amazement and envy, but that envy doesn't show up anywhere else in this book or any other book towards Jessica. It's not, you know what I mean? She doesn't seem threatened by Jessica. I guess what I'm saying is
threatened. It just says envy. Like, I think you're making something that is not. This is not that deep. Like, you're deeping it, as they would say on Love Island. You don't need to deep it.
I hate that. No, you're doing the thing that you always do, where you're fighting with me, but I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying she's not threatened by Jess.
No one is saying she is.
I'm saying it's weird that she's not. She's not threatened by Jess. I think it's weird that she's not threatened by Jess. And then you were like, well, in all the books, we never get her interiority. Maybe she is threatened by Jess.
I can't. I don't know what is happening. What what I need to say. Blah 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 blah. Okay.
There we go.
Now we get really funny. The introduction of Jessica's new love, Jay McGuire, and how French class has been delicious torture because she has to stare at him. And he's so gorgeous, and the green eyes and the gold highlights and the gazes are locking. But there's only one tiny problem, of course, that he has a girlfriend. But she is, as Robert said in the plot summary, a senior and Jay's a junior. And Jessica's talking to Carol, like, well, what should I do? And Jessica goes, it's not even as though she's any good for him. I mean, she's over a year older than he is. She's old enough to be his girlfriend, Kara cut in. That's so funny.
It is.
That really made me laugh.
The other interesting thing about their interaction is it starts with Kara saying, Jess, you're not listening to a single thing I'm saying. You're off in dreamland, which is exactly how the text of this book started. Here we've got Jess dreaming about Jay, which I feel like draws some parallels to the beginning of the book, which was Liz dreaming about Amy.
Mm-hmm. Amy's here.
Was it interesting to you that the phone rings? Liz, an excited feminine voice exclaimed, "It's me, Amy."
Doesn't sound like the mask Amy of our youth, the tomboy, the
The
sports
tomboy,
one.
the tomboy is no more. She's feminine now. I thought it was interesting. They go out of their way. I mean, they go out of their way in all of the ways to describe Amy to be like, she's banging, she's super hot, super, super hottie, hot, hot. It's interesting that they have to so immediately erase whatever preconceived notions we have of Amy. We're immediately smacked in the face, literally from the first word that Amy says, with the changes that Amy has undergone. And Liz doesn't see them and won't see them.
It's like Michael Sellers, the first time he talked to Liz, being like, "Hey, baby, where are you going? When can I meet you there? Catch you later." And her being like, "Oh, I guess he's just like Todd." Like, she's just delusional, always,
Yeah.
every single day of her life. So then Liz has plans to meet Enid at the beach and is like, "Well, let me just stop quickly to say hi to Amy on the way. Let me give her a quick hug," and then gets so horny struck by Amy that she forgets to ever go to Amy at the beach, and they don't have cell phones, so she can't call her. And she and Amy see each other and just talk about how gorgeous they are. Elizabeth thinks she looks like a fashion model. I mean,
I really like Liz's reaction to Amy when she said, basically, literally the first thing she says is, "Good Lord, Amy, you never told me you got so beautiful." Which is like such a funny, I know why she's saying it, but it's so funny to think of Amy. They like write only on their birthdays and Christmas. One Christmas, Liz getting a letter that's like, "Oh, just so you know, I'm very beautiful now, by the way. Just wanted to let you know that I have blossomed."
and it's like, when Amy had left Sweet Valley, she was a skinny kid who needed braces. Now, ... Well, Elizabeth could hardly believe her eyes. It's like she's taller, she has the hair, she has the fashions, and she's the flawless. Liz is like, "I feel like I have to pinch myself."
Yeah, it's really, and she's whispering. She whispers, "I feel like I have to pinch myself." It's truly wild. I
And then
wish
they
they had the
decide,
space to talk about their lesbianic feelings. I wish that's what I really want for this. It's just open conversation.
yeah, unfortunately. Then they decide Amy's gonna sleep over at Liz's, and Liz is like, "Oh shit." She realizes that she like stood Enid up at the beach, and Amy's like, "Who's Enid?" Which I thought was pretty revealing, because like, not that she and Amy have necessarily been so much talking, but the amount of times she's told Enid about Amy versus what she's told Amy about Enid is, it just shows, just reinforces.
There's an information delta, as you would say.
And we start getting more signals that, Amy might not be what Liz expects. She starts telling Amy how terrific Enid is, and Amy kind of interrupts her and starts talking about boys.
Which,
And, Liz is,
in Amy's defense, how boring is it to hear how great some other girl is? Like, I do kind of get why Amy's like, "Yeah, I'll meet her whenever. I don't really care."
and same about Enid regarding Amy. Yeah, it's really annoying. Like, so Amy comes to the Wakefield. She and the twins are giggling over old yearbooks. And isn't it funny, to Elizabeth's surprise and quote unquote delight, Amy and Jessica are actually getting along. Turns out they actually don't mind each other now. Isn't that interesting?
Hmm.
And Elizabeth thinks Amy's seems to be a little boy crazy, but Elizabeth doesn't blame her, because with her looks, she must get so much attention. Liz is having anxiety because she hasn't talked to Enid yet about the beach.
She's again described as she was listening to a conversation with only half an ear. So again, she's in this kind of like dreamlike state. First it was for Amy, now it's for Enid. She always wants the woman she can't be with.
She's never present,
Having
famously.
She's never present. Having two girlfriends sounds really hard. And I think that's most of what this book is about. It's hard to balance two girls.
Well, never forget when I worked with this guy who told me about how he lived in a house with 5 partners who he is their primary exclusive partner, and they are not his exclusive partners. So they each are only with him. And I asked them a lot of questions, and I could tell you they each get 1 day a week. and weekends are alternated. And I asked him, how do you decide about events? He said, rock, paper, scissors. He was
This is someone
serious.
you work with?
Yeah, worked in the past.
Did you ever meet any of the partners?
No. He said some people refer to it as a harem or a cult, but they just don't understand.
Hmm.
Liz basically tells Alice, like, oh, I'm stressed out about Enid. She's going to be so mad at me. And Alice is like, oh, I'm sure she'll forgive you. It's like, not a big deal. It's not like you always do that or whatever. And Liz is like, yeah, well, I have a great idea. I'm going to have brunch at the pancake house with Amy and Edith. Like, don't you think that's the perfect way to introduce them? But she didn't wait for her mother's reply. And I thought that was just another sort of nice small example of her not listening or not hearing people. It's like she's just plowing forward no matter what. And it's like, oh, so the way you're going to apologize to Enid is to force her into something with Amy. So she calls her, right? She apologizes over the phone. And she makes her go to the pancake house, which Amy is overdressed for in a glamorous black jumpsuit and boots.
I mean, yeah, she sounds great. Even Jessica has to admit they're ahead of fashion. A phrase that I've never really used, but would like to.
Things already start out awkward because she only orders a grapefruit and black coffee. And then she says something that makes us put the teeth emoji.
Yeah.
Trigger warning for, I don't know,
Everybody.
body image issues, eating issues, anything. She says, I have to be careful. I really hate myself if I weigh a single ounce over 110 pounds. Enid
And poor
gulped because
Enid.
she had ordered pancakes and now she is embarrassed. And Liz tries to be an ally to her and says, I'll have pancakes too. But Amy reminds her that she never has to worry. It is like a thread in these books that Liz and Jess like don't, quote unquote, don't have to worry and can, quote unquote, like eat whatever they want. And their bodies are just like always naturally exactly perfectly the same like every day. Whereas like other girls have to like watch it sometimes. They never do. It's almost like they're not human. And then we learn that Amy and Liz used to bond over binge eating at the Suttons' house after school because the Suttons were the ones with all the fun candy.
Mm.
And they used to eat themselves sick enough
Yeah.
to choke a horse, Amy says. And, you know, too bad Wednesday wasn't there. Twinkies, milkshakes, and those peanut butter cookies your mother made.
That sounds good.
Enid basically is trying to make an effort with Amy and like ask for questions and stuff. But she's kind of like turned off by her because she has a sense that she has like a false self-deprecation or false like insecurity, being like, oh, I'm so shy, like I'm not gonna fit in school, I'm so worried. And Enid like doesn't buy it. She thinks it's fake. And she kind of looks at Liz like, is she buying this? But then Liz is buying it, and Enid's like, what?
Yeah, that was really relatable to me, where it's like Enid sees immediately through this because Amy describes herself as shy when she's clearly been anything but shy. And it's just like this interesting position where Enid's like, well, I see through this. Does Liz see through this? And if Liz doesn't see through this, do I need to do something? It was just kind of interesting.
But like, that's not the worst thing in the world either. Like her being like, oh, I'm nervous, but like she doesn't seem nervous, or she says she's shy, she doesn't seem shy. It's like, that's not, I don't think that's such a crime at this point. Like, you know what I mean? And you would say, still, we must collect our da.
There is a lot of da still to collect. I can't do it anymore.
And then Liz like reinforces the pressure on them. And it's like Enid's like, well, she seems nice, even though does not think she seems nice. And Liz is like, I'm glad you think so. If you two hadn't liked each other, I just don't know what I would have done. So she's basically saying, like, you have to like her. It's just so weird.
Yeah, there are parts of this that feel a little like horror novel. Like there's the way to read this line. It's like, if you two hadn't liked each other, I just don't know what I would have done. But there's also a way to read this line like, if you two hadn't liked each other, I just don't know what I would have done. Like there's a like a gritted teeth threat there. And I love to picture Liz like the guy from Saw creating these kind of rooms of terror.
So what are you suggesting is the implication of what would be the threat? That what would she maybe have done if they
I think she would torture Enid. I think she would systematically ruin her life. Maybe she'd maim or mutilate her.
All right. Amy shows up at school and she's an undeniable hit. It turns out Liz didn't have anything to quote unquote worry about. Enid says, Liz, can we firm up our plans? And yeah, she says, we're all set to go to Tahoe and Amy's coming with. And Enid says, okay, but just got to make sure it's the same night that Lila's having her party and the Christopher's coming. So that's not going to be a conflict, right? You guys are fine with that? And Liz is like, yeah, of course, I'd rather go to Tahoe.
What's confusing to me about that is Elizabeth's face clouded over briefly and then said, who cares? I'd rather go to Tahoe. What's the cloud about?
That she thinks Amy is going to be disappointed and she's terrified of disappointing Amy.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just interesting. It's like, well, why wouldn't you just wait another week?
Well, at this point, she hasn't asked Amy.
Right.
That's why. So Liz is like, yeah, I'm going to ask her. And she's like, what am I going to do if they don't get along? What in the world was she going to do then?
Liz says she's going to ask Amy the second she can. Liz's aqua eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she watched Amy across the lawn, giggling and talking animated with Jessica, Carl Walker, and a crowd of their sorority friends. It would be good to get Amy and Enid alone together for a weekend, she told herself firmly. Once the three of them got away from school, away from Sweet Valley. There's like this horror, like no one will be able to hear their screams. There's also, I guess, like kind of a porny aspect that we could also be thinking about.
I don't really feel either of those.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Your limited imagination is not my problem.
So everyone's reading the Oracle, and they read the fake letters that Jessica put in there with the older, younger. So the first one is like, I'm a junior, my girlfriend's a senior, and she doesn't know any of my friends, and she's older than me, so she's always bossing me around. And it's signed Cradle Snatched. And Jessica had answered, as Miss Lovelorn had answered, wise up. You should date a girl your own age. And then a similar fake letter from a supposed girl who's a senior and she wants to dump her junior boyfriend. And then we learned that Lila is actually jealous of Jess and Amy. And Lila has been wanting to spend time with Jess, and Jess has been only focused on Amy, which is interesting too. Liz tracks Amy down, and she had flaked on her for lunch, but her winning smile made Liz ready to forgive her for anything. And she confirms with her the ski trip. And Amy just shrugs and says it sounds fine. And Liz is like, that's weird. Wouldn't she be a little more enthusiastic about this quite generous invitation to Enid's aunts? But then she's like, no, it sounds like fun. She gives her a hug and says it's going to be terrific. And Liz is like, okay. And then she like ditches Liz to go run back to Kara and Jessica. And Liz is like, it's weird. She's like, she's interested in cheerleading and all this like boys and gossip. But then the way she interprets it is, I must be doing something wrong. And she vows to improve her attitude, to be kinder and more generous with her friend. She wants to show Amy how deep the friendship runs. So it's really, kind of reminds me of Renee from France. It's the pursuing like energy. It's like Amy treats her in ways that are pretty like, she's inconsiderate. And she's like maybe uses her a little bit. The way Elizabeth internalizes it is, I have to make her like me more. I need to be more loyal, more generous. I need to show her I'm like the good one. It's like sort of, I don't know.
It's desperate and sad, is what it is. It like is like Liz doesn't value herself enough to be like, oh, don't treat me like this. Instead, she's like, oh, I'll change who I am and be better, and then she won't treat me this way. And it's like, oh, don't let your girlfriend do that to you. We find out that Amy is trying out for the cheerleading squad, which makes sense because she loves cheerleading. She was in the cheerleading squad at her old school.
And Elizabeth is like, wow.
She's disappointed. And the way that she thinks about it is, if Amy made the squad, Elizabeth knew she would see even less of her than she had so far. And it just feels like it's not that Enid and Amy are rivals. It's that she's jealous that Amy is having other experience and not spending all of her time with her.
We get the Wakefields eating a different breakfast than we've seen before, which is raisin toast and cream cheese, which got me excited.
Not for me. Not for me. Elizabeth says, oh, well, if triumph with the cheerleading squad is important to Amy, I hope she makes it. I'm going to come along this afternoon to watch her try out. Like that seems weird.
But yeah, she's just like desperate for her approval. She's She's being like Dee Dee with Bill, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's some really interesting moment between Liz and Jess. Liz tells Jess that she's not going to be at Lila's party because she, Amy, and Enid are all going to Tahoe. And Jess is like, skiing with Enid? Amy's really going with you? And Liz is like, yes, why shouldn't she? Jessica didn't answer for a minute. You know, cheerleader auditions are this afternoon, she said casually, fiddling with a bright cotton scarf around her neck. Elizabeth glanced at her. Really? She didn't understand the connection. And frankly, she wasn't that interested in what the cheerleaders did. Who's trying out? She asked. Jessica lists off a bunch of names, pauses dramatically, and then says, Amy Sutton. So the subtext here is Jessica is signaling to Liz that it seems incongruous or not likely that Amy's going to be wanting to go hang out with Liz and Enid and Tahoe rather than go to Lila's party when she's already, and the way she's sort of proving that is by saying she's trying out to be a cheerleader, i.e. she's like, here's hang out with us. You know, but like just not answering for a minute and then being like, by the way, cheerleader tryouts are coming up. And then getting Liz to say who's trying out. And then that's how she tells her this. It's interesting. She don't want to say it directly, you know? Unreasonable as it seemed, Liz had counted on the fact that she and her old friend would still have dozens of things in common. The old Amy Sutton was someone Elizabeth could share anything with. They used to spend hours together talking about the future. Liz had poured her heart out to her. I don't know. Later, I think there's a moment where it's like, it says like Elizabeth hadn't wanted to like admit that what they had isn't there, like that their friendship is different because like it would mean cutting out a part of her life that had been really important. And I think kind of similar to Todd, she thinks that for her relationship with Amy to change makes their friendship not meaningful or their history, it doesn't exist anymore. It has to be quote unquote cut out of her life. But that isn't true. Like it's okay to change. Doesn't mean your friendship isn't still a very nice thing that you had.
We then get Enid's interiority. Everything she'd seen of Amy strengthened her conviction that the girl was spoiled, selfish, and vain. She didn't like the way Amy treated Elizabeth either. Enid had the distinct impression Amy was using Elizabeth, that she had time for her old friend only when she needed something, which is like an accurate view of what seems to be happening at this point. This is coming while Elizabeth is blowing Enid off. They were supposed to go shopping, and instead Elizabeth is going to watch the cheerleading tryouts. And it just feels so desperate and so sad.
And Enid is like trying to be flexible, you know?
Mm-hmm.
All right, get to the cheerleading, sis boom ba. Amy does a great job, and no one looks surprised when she's declared the newest member of the squad. Then we get introduced to the lead up to the next book, or the next book after Super Edition.
Mm-hmm.
I think next is Malibu Summer and then this one.
What we're seeing is two of the cheerleaders are talking. One is Jean, who eagle-eyed readers might be confused, as I was, because it was like, there's no Jean on the cheerleading squad. So we went back to Wrong Kind of Girl, and it turns out that they used to call her Jeannie, but now they call her Jean. And we'll just kind of have to keep our eyes peeled for what they call her moving forward. But so Jean, who was always on the cheerleading squad, and Sandra, who also auditioned during Wrong Kind of Girl. And you may remember that she had that spectacular belly flop.
She flopped, literally.
Very literally. So Jean makes Sandra feel inferior. She knew she wasn't as pretty as Jean or as good in school. She couldn't do anything Jean couldn't do, which is such a weird way to say that. I know what she means, but she couldn't do anything Jean couldn't do. And then they bring up PBA, the very exclusive sorority that basically everyone in Sweet Valley every girl in Sweet Valley seems to be in, with the exception of former Fatty Never Forget Robin Wilson, who got blackballed, and Jean, inexplicably, who is also not in PBA.
And Regina never joined.
True. Although, was she there during a pledge open period?
I guess this would be the period, the one in the next book.
Yeah, where is she right now? I mean, she's at home, right? She's running around with Bruce Pittman in her hearing?
Patman, and yeah, they're just jogging, and they're just jogging.
Okay, as long as they're jogging.
So yeah, basically it's like the one thing Sandra feels that she has that Jean doesn't is her membership in PBA.
And I highlighted this and said, this is the next book, certainly.
We have her thinking to herself, what's wrong with me? She's my best friend. So why don't I want her to get into Pi Beta Alpha? Liz continues to notice that Amy doesn't really give a shit about her. At the cheerleading, she's congratulating her, and Amy just wants to hang out with the other girls. She tells Liz, feel free to get me a pair of gloves for the ski weekend. And Liz starts to wonder if it's even actually going to be fun. Then we're at the ski shop. Ski shop. Do you think the ski shop is in the same complex as the tennis shop?
In my head, it's all part of kind of like a apparel zone of Sweet Valley.
Apparel zone.
Yeah.
I picture it as like an outdoor mall, and it's so we got like medical center, and then all the downtown office buildings, like Ned's office, the hospital, and then a plaza where there's like the tennis shop, the
Ski
ski
shop.
shop.
They're buying ski gloves. For me, it's kind of a nothing burger.
I mean, the only thing not nothing burger about it is that Liz is picking up a pair for Amy, which is fine, but she picks up like the fanciest, flashiest pair that cost twice as much as the ones Enid had picked out or whatever, or maybe even the one she picked out for herself. So it's like, it's just showing that she's doing too much. Like this is strange. It's not necessary.
And she gets the same gloves as Enid as if they're a matching set. And she gets these flashy, expensive gloves for Amy as if to say, please like me, please take my gloves.
Reminiscent of the cover.
It must be said.
She and Amy in their chinos.
We get the first hints that Enid is distancing herself from Amy. Elizabeth says, hey, do you want to go to the Dairy Burger? And Enid's like, ooh, that sounds pretty tempting. And then Elizabeth's like, okay, we'll just like meet up with Amy and it'll be great. And Enid's like, oh, never mind, I gotta get home and make dinner. Bye. Liz goes to meet Amy at the Dairy Burger. And Amy's like, where have you been? I've been waiting for ages. Give me a ride home, will you? Johnny, who is her boyfriend from home, and they're like not having a long distance relationship, but they still seem to be kind of enmeshed, is supposed to call at 5:30, and if I miss him, I'll just die. And Elizabeth goes, I thought I was meeting you so we could get a soda, not so I could just drive you home. And then Amy kind of changes and smiles at her prettily and says, I know that, Liz. Honestly, do you think I'm a monster? It's just that I forgot all about John's phone call. That's why I've been going so crazy out here. It just suddenly crossed my mind that we would have more fun at home anyways, and then I'd be around when John calls. So there's this idea that Amy is changing plans, moving things around, using Liz. Not nice.
Absolutely. Liz is starting to clock some differences. She looks at Amy's bedroom and considers how different it is from her old bedroom that had, used to reflect all of her interests. And now it's just pictures of Amy and boys. And all she cares about is makeup and boys.
As if it would be more assuring if Amy still had a sixth grader's bedroom. Like that would also be creepy. Liz, people are allowed to grow up.
Well. And then Amy tells her she wants to change the Tahoe weekend because she wants to go to Lila's party. And Liz says, okay, fine, I'll try to talk to Enid. And this I think was the biggest line crossing where it's like Liz really should have said no at this point. Already they had planned this before she showed up. Already they had confirmed it with her. They've already moved it around a bunch of times. It's also like inconveniencing potentially Enid's aunt, who's like graciously extended this invite even to Amy, who like none of them even know. And it's like taking advantage kind of their generosity. And what I think is like so weird about this is a few pages later, Liz is reflecting on this and she's talking about it with Jess. And Liz is like frustrated that Amy changed the plans. And Jess is like, well, Amy's right. She agreed to go skiing with you when she hadn't even been back here that long. And like, of course she wants to go to the party. And then Jess says, it's not like she was trying to just get out of the trip. And then Liz goes, I guess I can understand. Amy could have just told us to go ahead without her. She obviously does still want to come. And Jess says, and I think that's incredibly generous of her, considering how cruel Enid's being. And then Jessica's like, don't you see? Enid's like, obviously doesn't like Amy and isn't giving her a chance. And she's just like jealous. So like, you don't even see that. And I'm like, that's so twisted because like what Amy should have done is say, you know what? I really want to go to this party. I know you guys have changed this for me already. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry. Stick to the plan. You guys go ahead. and have fun because I know we planned it, and we'll do something, the three of us, maybe the next weekend, so that they can still have their plan. And it's like so fucked up that like she didn't suggest it, that Liz like didn't decide to do that, but also that Liz
Right.
like interpreted her not suggesting it as a good thing because it means she
Yeah.
still wants to come, when it's actually her being selfish.
I also think it's kind of strange. Liz doesn't defend Enid at all. Jessica says Enid's jealous. She's being a complete and total pain. It just feels like Liz should say, hey, that doesn't really seem fair about my best friend. Like, Enid is not actually doing that.
Not only that, she internalizes it and thinks, so maybe that is what's going on. It actually influences her perspective. She thinks, was Jessica right? And she thinks how Enid didn't seem so enthusiastic about Amy. She didn't want to go to Dairy Burger and all this. Then at school, she meets Enid for lunch and she tells her, like, I have a huge favor. Please don't get mad at me. It turns out Amy really actually does want to go to this party. Is there any chance we can reschedule it again? And Enid gives the very reasonable response. Why don't we go anyway? Just you and me. We planned it before she even knew she was coming. We can always go again another time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to inconvenience my aunt. And again, it's like Liz can't bear the thought of disappointing Amy. She thinks it will destroy what was left of their old friendship. So she keeps pushing and Enid, no, change it. And Enid's like, fine, but this is the last time. I hope it's worth it.
It's interesting because when Liz is talking to Enid, she like really embellishes what happened between her and Amy. She says she can't bear the thought of missing the weekend, so she asked me if I could ask. Like, none of that is actually what happened, Liz. And then Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that she would be hurting Amy if she went up to Lake Tahoe that weekend with Enid and left Amy behind. It's this weird thing that makes perfect sense that Elizabeth is doing, where she's kind of projecting how she would feel. So she's saying like, oh, it would really be hurting Amy if I went up with Enid, when it wouldn't be hurting Amy at all, but it would hurt Elizabeth if that happened to Elizabeth. So she's assuming it would hurt Amy.
I think it's a combination of that. And also, as she's being treated this way by Amy and keeps being won over by Amy's dramatics and winning smiles, and she starts acting that way herself. Like her apologies to Enid, the whole book, like it's more like, oh my gosh, please forgive me, you're gonna kill me, like, oh, please don't, I'm so sorry, oh, this is the best thing in the world, oh, you're the greatest, I have to give you a huge hug, you're the greatest friend, how to get. And she's doing a lot of this same type of stuff that Amy's doing to her. It's manipulative. You know what I mean? Also, Amy's blowing off Liz, and then we have this moment where Liz realizes Amy has changed, and she realizes that she's been behaving inconsiderate to Enid the same way Amy's been to her, and she realizes that she owes Enid an apology. And we're like, okay, this is the next thing that's going to happen, is she's going to go do that apology. But like the books love to do, we get the one more random wrinkle or the one more random escalation, which is that Amy finally shows up and has some big dramatic excuse. And then Liz realizes that she actually really wants to believe Amy's bullshit because she doesn't want to cut out this important part of her childhood. And we're framing everything in extremes.
Liz knows that Amy is lying. Amy has this long roundabout thing about a dinner party at her parents' house and she couldn't get out of it and blah, blah, blah. And Liz is like, well, when I called, no one answered. How could no one answer if you were having a dinner party at your house? And she like has a quick lie that Liz doesn't believe, but she forces herself to believe it, basically.
We think we're going to get the next thing is going to be apology to Enid, but it's like she actually disses her one more time, I think, right? When she makes her not drive to the party with them.
Mm-hmm. It's the night of Lila's big party. It's the introduction of Christopher, and we get to wear our famous costumes.
Liz goes as a skier to send a secret message to Enid that she's still her number one, no homo. And Jess goes in a really, really gorgeous, sexy Cleopatra outfit, which is basically a gold bikini, and she even put glitter on her shoulders.
I know it's interesting that like body glitter was such a thing in 1985, whereas now it's like, could you imagine going as Cleopatra and not putting glitter on your shoulders? We've really come a long way in the body glitter community.
Ugh, I know, but I feel the reverse, which is like, wouldn't it be nice to live in a simpler time where like all you had to do to stand out was like put a little glitter on your shoulders, and it's like, wow, what now? Every bitch on TikTok has done that a million different ways. It's like,
Yeah, I hear you.
all right, then Amy is a really big bitch to Enid and tells her, "You make me sick. You think you can steal Liz from me?" Oh wait, we have the moment of Chris and Enid first.
This is the
Typically,
moment where
violent,
Chris and Enid meet again and rekindle their flame.
and Amy's jealous because she decided she like had the hots for him, so she now like hates Enid extra and yells at her about like, "You're trying to steal everyone from me, Chris, Liz. Like, you're the worst. Neither of them's ever going to talk to you again, and you're going to be sorry." And it's like, okay, so she's a monster. And Enid's like, "Well, I'm going to keep her threats to myself, and I'm not even going to tell Liz."
It was up to Elizabeth to make her own mind up about Amy. And no matter how horrible she was to Enid, Enid was going to keep it to herself for Elizabeth's sake. Huh.
What do you think of that? Did Enid make the right choice? Should she have told her?
Of course she should have told her.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think she should tell her. Liz and Amy have a fight. Enid tells Liz she wants a break for a couple of days. Alice decides to do mom.
Wait, you're going
And
very fast.
we have
I
4
think-
minutes, Robert.
Yeah, and then one of us dies, but it's not going to be me, right?
I'm hanging up at 6:51. Go. Go, just go.
So there's some drama and shenanigans about how everyone is going to get home from the party. Elizabeth offers Enid a ride home, but Enid says Chris is giving me a ride. And then Amy comes out and says, "I want to talk to you alone. I'm not going to come home with you. Chris is going to give me a ride." And Elizabeth is finally starting to see through this. It's like, wait, did you ask him to give you a ride, or did he offer to give you a ride? And she said, like, I told Chris that there wasn't enough room in your car, so I'd have to walk otherwise. So he offered. And finally, this was like, wait, you're lying. This is not nice. This isn't right. And Amy runs away crying into Chris's arms. And Enid gets mad at Liz too, and is like, well, you didn't correct, like you knew she was lying and you didn't do anything to fix that lie. And she runs away too. And so Jessica gets a ride home with Liz, just the two of them, because no one else wants to be in the car with Liz because of the way she's acting. Liz tries to reconcile with Enid, but Enid's basically like, I need time. And then Alice decides that it's time to be a mom.
And Alice basically says it sounds like Amy's actually manipulative. And maybe she was like secretly did even some bitchier and ruder stuff to Enid that you don't even know about. And that's why Enid's been distancing herself because she doesn't even want to tell you. And Liz is like, "Oh, wow, I wish I wouldn't have been so bad." And Alice is like, "No, but you were just giving her, you wanted to see the best in Amy, and like you were just fine and good." And I'm like, okay, Alice is like, what she's saying is true, but she's also, I think, putting a little too much blame on Amy. Like, she doesn't know that Amy's been secretly even a bigger bitch to Enid. Like, she could just say, you need to also set boundaries. Like, Liz also has some responsibility here of being disrespectful to Enid and standing up for herself. Like, the blame isn't all, takes two to tango. So there's that.
But then
Listen,
Liz just goes to Enid's house. It all works out. They forgive each other. It also all worked out for Enid and Chris. They're going on a date tonight.
but it's so crazy that like they reconcile and then Enid's like, "Let's still invite Amy." I'm like,
Makes no
you,
sense.
this is like, why? Why would you still invite Amy? No, 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 no. Then we get the wrap up of Jessica's plan with Miss Lovelorn backfires because Liz published the letters that Jay and Denise actually wrote about how they actually do miss each other and want to be together. So now they saw that, so now they get back together.
Elizabeth asks Amy again, do you want to come? And Amy finally says, I don't think I really want to come. I'm sorry, Liz. I just can't stand the thought of having to share you with Enid. And Enid just isn't really my idea of fun. You know what I mean?
Thank God she said no.
Yeah, thank God she said no. It's just like, it's very confusing. Amy saying, I don't want to share you with Enid, just like feels very, very strange.
I think it's her way of trying to say, like, me and Enid isn't it. Let's hang out one-on-one sometime, Liz.
Yeah.
You know?
Liz isn't mad, but she's disappointed and a little hurt, but she's got to realize that they've grown up and grown away.
Jean and Sandra are in the cafeteria, and Jean says, I really hate sandwiches. Sandra is gaining weight. They talk about Russo's chemistry quiz, and wouldn't you know, Sandra got an 85, but of course Jean went ahead and got an 87. And you know, it seems to Sandra lately that Jean, everything she does, is just doing a little bit better. And you know, Sandra's feeling reluctant to share her membership in PBA with her, and pledging season is starting in 1 week. And Sandra knew she was either going to have to put her friend up for membership or risk losing Jeannie forever. And the strange thing was, she still didn't know what she was going to do. So that one is going to be, will Sandra nominate Jean for Pi Beta Alpha? And can their friendship last if she doesn't? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 30, Jealous Lies. But before that,
another super edition. Jessica and Elizabeth have fun in the sun in Malibu summer, an extra big, extra exciting Sweet Valley High book for your summertime reading, which we will of course be reading in February, but that's totally fine.
any thoughts, feelings, predictions, fears, concerns, or cares about either of them?
I'm excited about Malibu summer. I'd love to spend the summer on the beach. I'm ready for an extra big, extra exciting Sweet Valley summer. So I'm also like, I don't care about Jean and Sandra, although I do love the title Jalouse Lies. I'm very excited about Jealous Lies. But I don't care about them, so I don't really care so much what happens.
Okay, I love Malibu Summer, so I'm excited.
Me too.
Please rate us on your app.
Also, if you enjoyed this podcast, please send it to a friend. If you hated this podcast, please send it to one of your bitter rivals.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.